Hello everyone, welcome back to Fanblade. This is episode 3 of the bass ukulele build, and the story so far is that we've got a purple heart fingerboard on a flame quiller neck. The back needs some more finish, but the fingerboard is coming along very nicely. That probably only needs a couple more coats and a whole lot of sanding. It also needs some dots and some frets, and that will be happening in due course. But right now, I have the window of opportunity where I can make a righteous mess of this garage by carving this body. Now, I have already rounded out certain parts of it with the router. That's looking alright, but I want to do some proper sculpting around this area, and this is oak. This is very hard. I don't want to do it by hand. I'm going to use an angle grinder with a flap disc on it, and that's going to kick up a cloud of dust the likes of which you have never seen before. In fact, the last time I did this on the base 6 build at the start of the year, I spent 2 days vacuuming every single flat surface in this garage. It was bad, so this time I'm going to hang a tarp over the sawdust area. And now we are faced with a little bit of a dilemma. Although, well, I suppose it's not really a dilemma because I know exactly what I'm going to do. But under different circumstances, we've revealed a lot of the wood grain here. This oak suddenly got a little bit more interesting than I was really counting on. Especially through the cutaway at the back here. That looks rather good. Unfortunately, that is the only part that looks any good. And it's on the back. So when I saw that, I thought, ooh, am I going to change my mind and just finish this in natural? But I don't really see enough there to justify changing course at this point. If anything, it just looks a little bit patchy where that bit's glued onto that bit. It's uneven, I don't like it, gonna stick with plan A, which is some crazy colourful fabric going across there. Hopefully that'll stretch out just enough that I can get it to conform to those curves that I've just carved in. In my previous attempt at this, the process was to put some epoxy on the wood and then lay the fabric on top, and that's when we discovered that the moisture made the fabric a little bit transparent and you could see the wood grain through it. So I'm going to give this a base coat in black because after all of this is done and glued on, and cut to shape and sand it out flat, I'm actually going to airbrush black around the edges. In the meantime, I will of course be finishing off bits of the neck. This is really where we start doing 2 jobs at once, and you'll probably see various amounts of progress happening on either side of the bench as we go. So let's go. Alright, so that has gotten all of the frets ready to go. I've gone ahead and just nipped the tangs off camera because every time I try and film that, especially in the fast motion, it just looks like I'm just frantically waving my hands about in mid-air and you can't really see what I'm doing, so I thought there's no point in trying to film it. Anyway, that's ready to go in the neck is ready to receive them, but it's been 24 hours and it's time for me to cut this thing free of its moorings and do the same to the front. Yeah, so there's been a few more drips than I was really expecting. I'm probably going to have to sand those out first, especially this white blob where it's taken a bit of the paint off. Not that you can really see on there, but yes, I think I'll cut the cloth off, give it a sand, and then we'll glue the front on. The body is coming along nicely. It is rough as guts at the moment. It's probably about, let's say, 10 grit sandpaper on the front there. Just got to level that off nicely. The edges, of course, need a lot of work to take that lip off and then clean everything up. Probably going to wind up taking off a lot of this black paint, but that's fine. I'm going to wind up airbrushing it all back in anyway. I did have the idea of attempting to match the colours to the top of the pickups. To be honest, that's a little bit problematic because I was simply going to use a little bit of super glue just to stick those down and then super glue finish on top, but I can't think of a way to get that perfectly flat and then make it sort of clean and neat. I also can't think of a way to accurately match the pattern because, of course, this is stretched and I need to stretch this in a very specific way to get the pattern to match. So honestly, I'm just not going to bother. That can, we'll forget that idea. And it's not going to actually matter because I am using a black bridge. And some black tuners have just arrived for it, so some black pickups, they'll look absolutely fine. Now the neck has had a couple of days since I filed the edges of the frets off. Of course, when I did that, I took a little bit of wood off the corner of the fingerboard, and the purple colouring, of course, sort of went with it. So I've given this a couple of days for that purple colour to return. It's looking pretty good now. I can go ahead and drop a little bit of super glue down each one of these slots just to glue the frets in. Then I can plug this end. I've already plugged that end. That is so that the super glue doesn't just dribble out the other end, because that does cause problems. Some people will tell you that you don't need to glue the frets in. I prefer to glue them in because I don't like to take chances with that, because I have had a cheap bass and the frets were falling out. Like, I don't need that, especially during the middle of the second set. Nobody needs that. I glue my frets in. So, please allow me to explain how we got here. I'd like you to meet Mabel. She's a spinster. Originally, I just wanted a way to mount a base so that I could rotate it to put a nice even coat of UV finish around the whole thing without having to put it down on any hard surface. That is essentially what I've got here, except I decided to stick a motor on it because, work smarter, not harder. This will allow me to put a slightly thicker coat of finish on there and then just let it spin for a few hours and it'll just self-level all the way around the thing. It's basically going to baste itself in its own finish. Now, if this thing works at all the way that I'm thinking it's supposed to, then I am going to have to rebuild this, because that's a 12-volt motor, and it's tiny, but it is attached to a gearbox, which is bringing its RPM down to 36 on the output. Now, that is also giving it a fair amount of torque. 36 RPM is a bit fast, though, and I did have the idea to 3D print a few pulleys and just build a whole sort of mechanism to try and get it down to about 2 RPM. Then I worked out it's a DC motor, so instead of running it on 12 volts, I'm running it just on a little USB, which is giving me about 10 RPM, still a little bit faster than I wanted. There's quite a lot that could go wrong here. Motor could burn out, the gearbox could just disassemble itself. This little acrylic bracket here, because don't forget, that's the torque bracket that is holding all of the torque in this entire system. That's the thing that's stopping the motor from spinning around and driving the shaft. If this thing lasts an hour, I'll be very happy. If it lasts 24 hours, then that opens up a few more possibilities. Because I've checked the weather forecast for the next few days, and it looks like UV resin might be off the cards. There's not going to be sunshine for about another week. So, I'm going to finish this with regular old 2-part epoxy, and I'm going to try and spin this thing for 24 hours, and if it makes it through, I'll be very happy. You can buy, I discovered, quite beefy motors that have gearboxes on them that go down to 2 RPM, which would be a much better choice for this. As a proof of concept, I'll be very happy if this lasts 24 hours. I suspect it's probably not going to. But if it does, and everything else works, then we're on to a winner. That's what I'm hoping for. And that is basically that. I'm just going to let that run for as long as it takes and see if there's any problems with it. I might just sit here and watch this for an hour or so, see how it goes. But yeah, I think that's probably it for now. So yes, thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much for subscribing. And I'll see you in a week or so, and we'll find out if this actually worked. Don't feel the need to stick around or anything. There's nothing else happening here. I'll see you later.